The 2024 fire season in Idaho saw mandatory evacuations in communities across the state like Stanley and Julietta and Cascade. And the recent wildfires in Los Angeles served as a grim reminder how easily a fire can decimate a community. Governor Brad Little held a press conference on Friday to highlight his budget recommendations regarding wildfire, including $100 million to replenish the state's Fire Suppression Deficiency Fund, with $40 million in ongoing annual funding for fire suppression preparedness. The governor's office is also working with lawmakers this year to address the fire's impact on insurance and utility rates.
The expenses to the utility companies ends up on all of your bills. And it's the same thing with insurance. If we have enormous fire claims like they're going to have in California, those insurance companies in California are part of the insurance companies that we have here. So it's literally in everybody's interest that we address the utility side of it and we address the insurance side of it. Because for a young family getting started, they got to pay their power bill and they got to pay their insurance. Sometimes the insurance is in your mortgage payment. But that is something that everybody pays. So anything we can do proactively ahead of time to keep the cost of utilities down and the cost of insurance down is good for all of Idaho.
Joining me to discuss insurance and other issues is Director Dean Cameron of the Department of Insurance. Director Cameron, how do we keep those insurance costs down?
Well, it's a balancing act. Insurance is about spreading risk. It's about managing risk. So there are strategies that have been put in place over the years on various types of insurance products that work. And so we're proposing putting forth some of those ideas for our property insurance market. We have about 91 insurance companies that sell in Idaho. Last number I saw was about 22 of those had asked to non-renew certain policies in certain areas. So it's becoming a problem. We're also
basically saying we're not going to cover fire insurance for this part of the state or the entire state.
Right. They're required, once the contract's signed, they're required to stay with them for a year, but they can choose not to renew at the end of the year or at the end of whenever their contract terms, or they can raise rates dramatically. We're starting to hear from home builders and realtors and lenders that they've got houses for sale but aren't able to sell them because the new homeowner can't find insurance coverage. And so it's becoming a larger and larger problem. The way we manage it is by spreading the risk, helping homeowners prepare and harden their homes, and spreading the risk amongst the other carriers that are in the marketplace.
And what are you proposing the legislature do to address this?
So we introduced a bill, and it's the first foray. We're grateful for the legislature for printing the bill to start the discussion and have things move forward. We've been working on this concept for more than a year, and really thanks to the governor's leadership in trying to push forward. The bill creates a high risk pool, if you will, a wildfire risk pool, mitigation pool. We mimicked part of it after what we saw in Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, and a lot of southeastern states.
Hurricane-prone states.
Hurricane-prone states, where they created a pool to help homeowners harden their homes against hurricanes. They issued grants. They were $10,000 grants. I don't know what our amount will be just yet. And those grants then were used to harden those homes. That's resulted in their homeowners insurance having a reduction this year of almost 25%. So we're seeing significant changes. So that's part A of the bill. That's a strategy to help homeowners and mitigate that risk. The part B is more of a stabilization factor. How do we stabilize the market so that carriers will be in all parts of the state? We have some carriers that will sell in certain parts of the state, but not in certain areas. They will exclude a specific county or a region or an area where it may be more prone to fire. So we're trying to employ strategies that have worked in other areas. For example, in Idaho, we have our high risk pool for health insurance. That's resulted in the number of carriers being doubled in Idaho since we started it, and it's resulted in rates being down. Our rates on the individual marketplace are lower today than they were 5 years ago because of that high-risk pool and because of a 1332 waiver with the federal government.
You touched on something that I want to circle back to, that there are carriers who will insure some parts of the state but won't offer property insurance or fire protection in other parts of the state. Fire risk is not uniform across Idaho. It's not even uniform within an individual county or community. And we know that the Department of Lands has a fire risk map in its forest action plan. How can you give us some insight into what the landscape is for a homeowner in, say, Bonner County versus Benewah County?
Yeah, so it's challenging. It's also challenging depending on the insurance company, because there's no uniform standard that every company has to follow a certain modeling that's being done. And as fire risk has become more challenging, there are more and more companies doing modeling to predict where forest fires might occur and how they might occur, and etc. We've seen, and our information largely comes from agents or consumers who call us with complaints. Almost a day doesn't go by right now and we're getting either a complaint about their coverage being dropped or their rates going up. We are also, interestingly, starting to get calls as to how to harden their homes. So in certain counties, so we had 2 years ago, we had a few carriers saying to us, we're staying in your state, but we're not going to sell in parts of Kootenai County or parts of Blaine County. And then that spread and other carriers were doing more of that. We even had situations in Bonner County where they were, the county government was having difficulty finding coverage, and other areas. So it's really about how that community has responded. It's also about how we have spread the risk, if we've been able to mitigate the risk. And so that's really what this pool is about, is to try and help counties, communities, commercial businesses as well as residential homes harden their facility against forest fires.
Let's talk about hardening facilities and properties a little bit, because we've talked about Firewise landscaping for a long time in Idaho. I've reported on it, but seeing what happened not just in Idaho in the past couple fire seasons that were devastating, but also in California, where some homes, because of their landscaping, were totally spared. What can homeowners do outside of waiting for legislation to pass to harden their properties against wildfire risk?
Yeah, there are a number of things they can do immediately that don't cost hardly anything. You can put mesh in your eaves. A lot of times fires are started from one house to another house because the embers will travel and fly up through the eaves and then end up in your attic and start your home on fire. So you can do that. You can move the juniper trees that we all love and love to have around, move them away from your homes. Our fire officials call those gas cans because they can ignite like that, and then all of a sudden the side of your house is on fire. You can be wise about, if you're building a home, if you're re-roofing, if you're putting up fence, be wise about your choices of the materials. We did a demonstration earlier this year. We held a wildfire forum where we built 2 structures. They looked identical. One was built with fire retardant material. The other was built with traditional material. The one that was built with traditional material burned to ground. We lit them both on fire. That was the funnest part of the job.
At the same time, right?
At the same time. Lit them both on fire, but one had fire retardant vegetation, fire resistant vegetation, I should say, and fire retardant bark. One burned to ground in less than 20 minutes, and the other didn't have any effect whatsoever. It was so hot you couldn't touch it, but it still did not burn. So if you're building, if you're in the process of building now, it doesn't even cost that much more. Build with fire-resistant material. Put the fire-resistant shingles on. Have the eaves put in. All of those kinds of things. And Firewise has been a great advocate for many of those things for years. It's just sort of been out of the limelight a little bit, and now we're hoping to push it much forward again.
Whether we're talking about high-risk pools within the insurance industry or more, let's say, heavy-handed legislation that would keep costs low, at what point does that artificially lower costs and encourage people to move to areas that are very high risk, that are prone to wildfires, as opposed to letting the market decide, what makes sense where people live?
Yeah. So the market already has an influence based on where they live. You're certainly in a good market. Your rates are different if you live in areas that are more prone to fires than if you live in communities. But I mean, we only have to look and see what's gone on in California. Nobody is exempt.
Right.
The sad part is, out of all the catastrophic events that have occurred across the country, whether you're talking about hurricanes, earthquakes, or what have you, forest fires are preventable. Forest catastrophic loss can be prevented and can be mitigated. It's about making the choices. And even if you are living in urban areas, you're paying the price for this right now. Your rates have a reflection of the costs that are occurring. That's what the governor was saying in his comments, is your rates are influenced based on what's going on in the Idaho market, but also what's going on in the market in other areas.
And as we know, weather events are becoming more extreme, have been for years, and that trend isn't reversing. So, what kind of reception have you received from lawmakers on this plan? We have about 20 seconds left.
Yeah, obviously this is first I want to thank them for introducing the bill. Lots of questions, support, also questions about, how does this work, and understandably so, and it's complicated. I think we'll have newer versions and it'll probably be amended.
Of course.
We've had one
We have to leave it there. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Director, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
watching. We'll see you next week.